Picture this. You come home from a 12-hour shift, exhausted, feet aching, and taped to your front door is a $400 fine. 4. Your mailbox, being 2 inches too far left. That's not a joke. That's life inside Crimson Pines, the most feared HOA in Delwood County. And the woman behind it all? Vivienne Blackwell. Self-appointed queen, unelected, unchecked, and about to be completely undone. Vivienne had ruled Crimson Pines for 4 years with an iron fist wrapped in a cashmere glove. She fined people for wind chimes. She fined a widow for planting yellow tulips instead of white. She once fined a disabled veteran $750 because his wheelchair ramp disrupted the visual symmetry of the cul-de-sac. The board? Her three closest friends, Dolores Fitch, the gossip, Preston Whale, the yes man, and Greta Sunholm, who hadn't had an original thought since 1987. Together, they ran Crimson Pines like a private empire. Fines poured in, appeals were ignored, liens were slapped on homes, families were financially strangled, all while Vivienne sipped Chardonnay at her kitchen island, signing violation notices like they were autographs. But here's what Vivienne never counted on. A new neighbor, quiet, unassuming, a recently retired municipal attorney named Gerald Okafor, who just happened to know exactly what a legal HOA meeting looked like, and he'd never seen one. Not once. Not in 4 years. Gerald Okafor wasn't the type to make noise. He unpacked his boxes, planted his garden, waved at neighbors, and quietly requested a copy of Crimson Pines' HOA records. Board meeting minutes, financial statements, election results, everything. Vivienne personally handed him a thick manila envelope with a smile so tight it could crack glass. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said. She thought she was handing him paperwork. She was actually handing him a loaded weapon. Gerald sat at his dining table that night with a yellow legal pad and a red pen. By midnight, the pad was almost full. By 2 a.m., he was on the phone with a former colleague, laughing in disbelief. The meeting minutes, 4 years of them, were identical. Same date format, same wording, same grammatical error on the word quorum, printed on the same printer, signed with suspiciously consistent ink. They hadn't been recorded over time. They'd been manufactured in bulk, likely on a single afternoon. Worse, the HOA's own governing documents required meetings to be publicly noticed 72 hours in advance, held in an accessible community space, and open to all residents. Not one of those meetings, not a single one in 4 years, had ever been announced. No notices posted, no emails sent, no community room reserved. Vivienne and her board hadn't held one legal meeting, ever, which meant every vote they took was void. Every rule change, invalid. Every fine they issued, legally unenforceable. Every lien placed on a neighbor's home, fraudulent. Gerald capped his red pen, leaned back, and smiled for the first time since moving to Crimson Pines. He wasn't going to make noise. He was going to make history. Gerald didn't post on social media. He didn't knock on doors dramatically. He did something far more dangerous to Vivienne Blackwell's empire. He organized a residents' meeting, properly noticed, 72 hours in advance, posted on every mailbox, sent via email, reserved in the community room, everything Vivienne never did. 43 homeowners showed up, standing room only, people who had silently paid fines for years, swallowed their anger, and convinced themselves this was just how HOAs worked. Gerald stood at the front, calm as a surgeon, and walked them through every single document. The forged minutes, the missing notices, the duplicate signatures, the $340,000 in collected fines over 4 years with no transparent accounting of where a single dollar went. The room went from confused to furious in under 8 minutes. Dolores Fitch, who had slipped into the back to spy, panicked and called Vivienne mid-meeting. Vivienne's response? Show up in person, uninvited, and attempt to shut it down. She walked in wearing her HOA lanyard like a badge of honor, pointed at Gerald and said, and these words would later be read aloud in court, "This meeting is unauthorized and every person here is in violation of community conduct policy." Gerald let her finish. Then he held up a single document, the HOA's own bylaws, and asked her softly to point to the page that gave an unelected board member authority to silence residents on common property. She couldn't. Preston Whale quietly stood up and walked out. Greta Sunholm burst into tears. Dolores was still on the phone with nobody. And Vivienne Blackwell, the queen of Crimson Pines, stood alone at the front of a room full of people she had terrorized for 4 years, finally seeing something she had never prepared for: consequences. Within 48 hours, separate attorneys had been retained by residents. A formal complaint was filed with the state's HOA regulatory board, and a class action lawsuit, 43 plaintiffs strong, was officially drafted, targeting Vivienne, Dolores, Preston, and Greta personally. Not the HOA, them, personally. The state audit took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of forensic accountants, subpoenaed bank records, and investigators who had seen a lot, but admitted they'd never seen anything quite like Vivienne Blackwell's bookkeeping. Of the $340,000 collected in fines over 4 years, only $87,000 could be traced to legitimate HOA expenses. The remaining $253,000 had quietly flowed into a private account controlled exclusively by Vivienne, disguised under a vendor name called Pines Property Consulting LLC. There was no office, no employees, no services rendered. It was Vivienne, just Vivienne, billing her own neighborhood for nothing. The charges came fast and they came hard. Fraud, embezzlement, filing false public documents. Vivienne's attorney, the expensive one she hired the morning of the residents' meeting, withdrew from the case 2 weeks before trial. A second attorney lasted 11 days. Dolores Fitch flipped first, offered a full testimony in exchange for reduced charges. Preston Whale cooperated so fast he didn't even finish reading the plea agreement before signing it. Greta Sunholm, in the most unexpected twist of the entire saga, turned out to have kept a private journal documenting every illegal board decision, dates, conversations, Vivienne's exact words, because as she told investigators, I always knew this day would come. Greta walked, completely. Vivienne did not. She was convicted on 11 counts, sentenced to 4 years in state prison, and ordered to pay full restitution to every resident she had ever fined. The house she had ruled Crimson Pines from, the one with the perfect white tulips and the symmetrical mailbox, was seized to partially cover the debt. Gerald Okafor watched the moving truck empty Vivienne's house from his front porch, coffee in hand, garden freshly watered. The new HOA board, elected properly, legally, transparently, held their first official meeting that same evening. First item on the agenda, abolish all fines under $500 requiring board pre-approval. Motion passed, unanimously. And somewhere in Delwood County, a widow quietly planted yellow tulips in her front yard for the first time in 4 years. Nobody fined her. Nobody ever would again. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what happens when power meets paperwork. And paperwork wins every single time. If this story made your jaw drop, your blood boil, or your spirit do a little victory dance, smash that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And most importantly, drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you're watching from. We want to see you. Justice, always, wins.